Alright guys, today we're doing the timing belt and water pump on a 1998 Toyota Avalon. Stay tuned. Alright, so this is the vehicle right here. We're doing it in my garage today because it is super cold outside. It's my brother's car. He recently acquired it. And it's got just at 100,000 miles. It was at like 99,000 something when he got it. And these timing belts are due at around 90,000 to 100,000. And I do not believe that it has been done. So we're going to go ahead and tackle that job today. Got a little bit different lighting set up here. I wish I could have my garage open, but it's like 20 degrees outside, so this is going to have to do. Could use the light on my phone as well, but I'd like to save some battery so I can film this. It does actually look like the timing belt's been replaced, but the timing belt that's in there now has been in there for more mileage and for longer time, so we are going to go ahead and replace it. The first thing I'm going to do is remove this bracket and this bracket here with the little dog bone type engine mount here. So I'm going to do that. Alright, so the first thing I did was I took off that small bracket, just 3 12mm bolts, and then that one was actually right in this general area here. Then the next thing I took out was this piece, which was 2 very long 14mm that went through here, and then the short one was over here. So the long ones go through the next piece I'm going to show you and screw into here. There's a guiding pin right here, or a hole for it rather, in the middle. And that's where that third 14mm went. Then this piece comes off. There's that guiding pin. It's a little rusty. I might clean that up a little bit, but you just got to give it a couple taps with a rubber mallet here and it comes off no problem. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and remove that coolant hose, and I am going to go ahead and take off the wheel because I got it jacked up already. Then we'll remove the cover behind that wheel. Alright, so I went ahead and got this hose disconnected from that nozzle right there. I just took the cap off, put it in the reservoir. Also went ahead and disconnected these 2 connectors just to give me some space over here, just for the hell of it. Also went ahead and disconnected the negative battery cable. I also went ahead and tried to unclip this harness as much as I could to get it away from the timing cover. So I might grab something to hold that up. But then I went and removed the wheel. I got this cover out of the way, which is this right here. And I got both of the belts off. The alternator belt, I loosened this nut on the stud, and then I loosened this enough to where I could take the bracket out. It goes just like this if you're looking at it from the front of the car. This is the alternator side, that's the stud side. So I just loosened, not removed, this bolt enough to get that out. And this is your pivot bolt. So then I went down here to this one and I loosened that up a little bit. And then I took my driver swivel, an extension 12mm, and I just loosened that nice, and it went down and I was able to remove the alternator belt. The more fun belt down here was the power steering belt. This bolt right here to the left in the slotted groove had to be loosened, and then I took my little snap-on punch deal here and I put it on the edge of the washer, kind of at this angle, and I just tapped it with a hammer. This is kind of the angle that I put my chisel through at, and that pushed the power steering pump up enough to where I could get that second belt off. And I also tried to remove this nut, or bolt rather, with my electric impact, and that didn't even come close. So I fired up my compressor, and I'm going to use my air impact, and hopefully that sucker will come off, because I do know that unless you have some specialty tools for it, that this can be one of the more difficult parts of the job. So hopefully it's not too difficult. Alright, so I did get that bolt out of there, but it was not with my battery powered impact. It was not with my air impact, which is even worse than my battery powered. I actually had to do a big no-no, which is to go ahead and put a pry bar, or a breaker bar rather, 22 millimeter, and then I just put it to where it was on there and sitting against the ground, and I just bumped the starter a couple times, and that broke it loose right here. I know that's not generally recommended, because you can send that breaker bar flying, it could damage something, but I've never really had any bad experiences doing that, and it ended up working for me, so I can proceed with the job. So sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. I've seen another video of this job where a guy had a special 22 millimeter socket that he used to remove that. It was like super thick on the sidewalls. I had never seen one quite like that before, but part of the reason I decided to make this video is because that one was the only other one I saw on it, so I figured I'd go ahead and add a little bit to the pool of videos for this job, just to help some of you guys out here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get a puller, and I'm going to put the bolts through those holes, and we're going to go ahead and get this pulled off of the crankshaft. Alright, so luckily the crank pulley slid off of the shaft quite a bit easier than that bolt came out. So now it looks like there's one bolt there and another bolt there that holds on the lower part of the timing cover. Does look like we've got the timing cover pretty much completely exposed. I do believe that we have to pull this piece out next though, and I think there's like 4 bolts and 2 studs or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that, and then I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so we got our lower timing belt cover off. There's definitely some oil going on in there, but I'm not really sure if it's the crank seal or not, because other than this one little spot right there, it doesn't really look greasy at all behind that crank pulley. And so I'm wondering if that's just from this super leaky power steering pump right here. I'm also pretty sure that the valve cover gasket on the back is leaking, just because the front one is most definitely leaking, and I think the power steering is leaking because you can kind of tell that it's a little low. So I'm kind of hoping that the crank seal isn't bad, because we don't have those, and I don't really have the special type of seal pullers that's needed, nor do I have the tool to hold these sprockets in place to remove them. So I'm kind of hoping that we don't have any leaks going on right there. Anyway, we are totally able to see the full timing belt, pulleys and all. And then our water pump is right down here. We're going to be getting at that as well. So the upper timing cover I've got down right here, and that's got 5 bolts in it. 4 of them are relatively easy to get to, and they're on the middle to front side. And there was one back here that goes right here that you have to take off with a ratchet or something. Otherwise, you can get a power tool with a swivel or something in there to get the rest of them off. So now I'm going to go ahead and put the crankshaft bolt back in, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure that this is lined up at top dead center. Really quick, before I got full access to the timing belt, I did have to take this off. It's got 1 stud, a nut, and 2 bolts. pretty easy to get that off, honestly. That's how I was able to fully get access to the timing belt. You can kind of see those two studs is where it sits on. Just kind of covers up the water pump there. So anyway, I've got everything lined up to top dead center. You can see that little groove here is lined up with the notch and the top of the metal piece there. Then on the back side, hopefully I can get my camera in there. Maybe not. Okay, you can kind of see where that mark is on the top of the pulley is lined up with kind of that grooved piece on the metal behind it. I'll try to zoom in a little. That's the groove I'm talking about, and that's lined up with the mark on the sprocket. And then now we've also got that little dot on the top kind of lined up with the A right here. It's about where you want it to be roughly. So that should be at top dead center. Now I'm going to go ahead and loosen these two bolts for the tensioner just a little bit at a time. Loosen one, loosen the other, back and forth until it comes out. And I should be able to go ahead and remove the timing belt. Alright, so we went ahead and loosened each one of those bolts there for the timing belt tensioner a little bit at a time, and then that caused this to lower down slowly, and then that enabled me to remove the entire timing belt, and there it is right there. And then here is the tensioner. So now I am pretty close to the halfway point. I'm going to go ahead and remove the idler pulley, and then I'm going to go ahead and remove this Allen bolt. I believe it's a 10 millimeter, and we're going to go ahead and replace the tensioner pulley assembly as well. So I'm going to go ahead and be removing those three items next. Alright, so we got the one 10 millimeter hex bolt out of the tensioner, and then this idler pulley bolt was just a 14 millimeter. The idler sat right here, and then the tensioner sat right down here. You can kind of see where the bolt went, and I'm glad that I noticed this little washer too. I assume that this washer goes on the back side here, and I did not notice that, so I'm glad that I came across that. Pretty sure the guy in the other video I saw even said not to lose this, so I'm definitely glad that we came across that. So anyway, we got that and that off. Next thing we want to do is go around and remove the 10 millimeter bolts and nuts that are holding on the water pump. Alright, so we got that water pump out. And if you are replacing the cam sprockets, or the cam seals rather, and the lower crank seal, you will have to go a little bit farther than this. You will have to take the cam sprockets off and the plate here. And I thought I was going to be able to completely avoid that, but unfortunately the upper part of the water pump gets kind of stuck on this. And I really did not want to take these off because I'm not going to be replacing those seals. I don't think they're leaking, and this vehicle just hit 100,000. So maybe we should go ahead and replace them, but I don't think that it's going to be that big of a deal if we don't. He's got a massive valve cover gasket leak. That's leaking more oil than anything. So anyway, if you are at this point and you are not going to replace those seals, the water pump may get stuck behind there a bit because of this plate. So what I did was I took this bolt out and this bolt out, and I also took those two long studs out, and I used a E-Torx socket on the end of it. Where's that one that I used at? It's got to be over here somewhere. Huh. Where is... Oh, it's right here. Use this type of socket, the one that looks like a reverse Torx. And it is E8. I don't know if you guys can see that. E8. So that's what I got those studs out with. And by loosening up or taking those two bolts out and getting those studs out, I was able to sneak the water pump out of there. So I took the gasket off and I wiped everything down, got the surface all cleaned up. To be honest with you guys, I haven't done a whole lot of timing belts. This is only like maybe the third timing belt I've ever done. But I was actually very surprised at how clean the gasket mating surfaces already were just from pulling it off. I mean, there was like no gunk on there at all. I pretty much just wiped it down with one of those rags that I use to clean my hands with, and I feel like that's all we're going to really need to do. And I assume that most timing belt water pumps are going to be pretty similar to that because they stay covered up their whole life and therefore they stay fairly clean. So that's kind of nice. I was going to pull out my whiz wheel on the compressor and clean that off a little bit, but I actually don't think we're going to need to do that. So I'm just going to shut this off. So I think we are officially at the halfway point. The next thing we need to do is take a break, first of all. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to put the new water pump gasket on and the new water pump. Another thing I want to just throw in there real quick. Look at this valve cover leak. That's the back of the timing cover right here. So I can't even reliably say that the cam seal is leaking when I know for a fact that this valve cover is what caused that. That's one of the reasons why I feel comfortable not replacing them. Plus, chances are my brother will still have this car at 200,000 miles, and he's going to need another timing belt then, and if it's really that bad, we'll just go ahead and replace it at that time. I mean, realistically, this job's not that bad to do anyway, and if we were to have to come back and do that without doing the belts again, we wouldn't even have to mess with the water pump or none of that. So I'm really honestly not worried about this particular seal on either three of them, because I think the main leaks are the valve covers and the power steering pump. We'll be right back and we're going to throw that water pump in there. Alright, so we've gone ahead and opened the box. We got all our new parts laid out here. So I'm going to go ahead and install the new water pump gasket and the water pump. Okay, so I was able to get the water pump snuck in behind this plate here. I just used a pry bar up in this area and kind of pulled it out just a little bit. And I was able to slip the top of the alternator, or the water pump up under this edge. This is the edge where it's going to get stuck. So if you just take those two bolts out, like I said, you should be able to sneak it in and out of there, no problem. That pulley seems to be spinning fine, so that's good. Got all the bolts back in somewhat of an alternating pattern. There's two nuts and studs, one here, and then there's another bolt, 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 and bolt. There's not one on the very bottom though, just over here. So we got all of that tightened up, ready to go. We got our two studs put back in. So the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and install our new idler pulley and tensioner pulley assembly. Alright, so now we've got our new water pump, idler pulley. That one spins good as well. And then we've got our tensioner pulley assembly installed, brand new, by putting this 10mm hex bolt back in and not forgetting to put our washer back on the back side. So now we are at the fun part. We want to make sure that we're still at top dead center, which that cam still appears to be good. And then let me grab a light here. Okay. And then it's kind of hard to see. That kind of looks like we're still pretty much lined up with that as well. Let me triple check here. I'm going to be able to feel it. The light keeps dying on me. may have to adjust that one just a tad bit. Okay, so I was able to get some stuff moved out of the way real quick here, and we most definitely have it lined up now. You guys should hopefully be able to see. Oh, well, you can't see the thing. Here we go. Move you over here. That gear tooth that lines up with the mark is now perfectly in alignment with the notch, or the little arrow rather. There we go. We are lined up indeed. Same over here. We got that tooth that corresponds with that line, and it's directly lined up with the little cutout right there. Then on the bottom, we've got sort of a little arrow looking deal right above that dot on the gear. So we're lined up there as well. So now we're going to go ahead and put on the belt. Okay, so we for sure have them lined up this time. You can see the lines are all lined up there with it in focus. While I have this lifted up, you can tell that the line is lined up with the dimple on the back. And then now if I zoom in here, yeah, you can pretty much see the entire thing is lined up there. And then we come over here. There's the little line lined up with that line, which is lined up with this. I feel like the line itself is slightly off to the left, but it's supposed to line up with this tooth. And that tooth is lined up with this. So I think we're good to go there. And then down here, we just got to get her on and we should be good to go. Alright, so the next thing I did was I went ahead and moved the crankshaft one tooth counterclockwise to where the dot on top right there moved away from the arrow above it, one tooth, and that enabled me to line everything up down here and move all the slack to this side. And I believe that this dotted line on the belt should line up with the tooth with the dot in it, and it's got the arrows and it says FR indicating that that side should be facing the front. So now I believe we just have to put the new tensioner in and put the tension on it, and the timing belt portion of it should be totally finished. Alright, so now we've got our new timing belt tensioner installed. Oh dear, that was my face there for a second. Hit the wrong button. So anyway, now that we've got this installed, it's actually got a grenade pin in it to where it holds back the tensioner part, and you don't have to basically stair step out each bolt a little at a time. You can just go ahead and put them in one at a time if you want. I mean, I'd still recommend, you know, hand tightening them up a little bit and tightening them, but it makes it where you can kind of put it on a little easier. So now I'm going to pull this pin and the tensioner should be set. Come on now. Doesn't want to come out. It's in there. Huh. I'm twisting. Come on now. Ah, there we go. Alright. We shouldn't have any tension. Yeah, or rather, we shouldn't have any slack. Let me check here. Good. Good. I think we're alright here. Awesome. Alright. Alright, so the next thing I went ahead and did was I spun the crankshaft around multiple times. 2, 4, 6, 8, probably even 10 times. And I checked every other one. And of course, since this thing has so many teeth on it, the lines aren't always going to come back. But every time you would go in a full 2 circles, you would see your lines markings matching up again on both sides. Well, this one's always kind of hard to show you guys. Yeah, you can kind of see it there. You can barely see the line on the sprocket. And then down here, of course, we're good as well. And it was like that every other time I turned it around. So I don't know how many times you'd have to turn it to get the actual lines on the belt to line back up. But I did go ahead and check my work. If there's one thing I know about these type of jobs, you definitely want to check your work before you put it back together, because it could be bad news if this timing is not off, or if it is off rather. So now that we've got all that done, I'm comfortable with going ahead and moving forward and putting the timing covers and everything back on. Now we've got the lower section of the engine mount reconnected and bolted on, as well as the bracket that goes to the alternator here. We have not tightened this up yet because we still need that as our pivot point. If I do say so myself, this part was a bit of a pain in the ass to realign, but we got her on there. Next thing we're going to do is go ahead and reinstall the upper part of the timing cover. I already got our sticker on there, so I'm going to put this on now, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the lower piece on. Alright, now we got our upper timing cover back on. The engine is closed back up and it feels nice. Went ahead and wiped it on down with the Armor All wipe so it's nice and shiny, because I want it to actually look like the timing belt has been done recently. So now I'm going to move down here and do the same thing on the lower cover. We're going to go ahead and put that back on. Alright, same thing here on the bottom. We got that lower cover installed, all 4 bolts. You can see 3 of them there, and then there's the 4th one. Okay. Also wiped it down with the Armor All wipe as well. That way the entire front of the engine is relatively clean from top to bottom. Okay, so up here I went ahead and reconnected the hose that goes to the reservoir, and I also reconnected our 2 ground strap wires here. Down here on this side, we went ahead and put the crankshaft pulley back on. It does appear to be seated in all the way and lined up with the other pulleys. So now I'm going to go ahead and put the power steering belt back on. Alright, so for this part, I went ahead and I stuck this pry bar in there behind the pump, and I pushed it to the left, and that was able to move this bolt down here to the left side of the slotted groove there. And then I took a 12mm ratchet and extension and I tightened that up. Then I can go ahead and remove my pry bar, and that belt seems to be pretty good and tight there. Next, I'm going to go ahead, take the alternator belt. We're going to go ahead and put that back on. We are getting very, very close. Of course, I'm going to probably end up needing 2 hands for this, maybe. Oh, there we go. Got that on there. Okay. Okay, of course. Fell off the AC there. Now we got her on there. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and tighten this up. Then we can tighten this up. And then the last one is our pivot bolt. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten those up now. Alright, we're pretty much there now. We got our little engine mount spacer deal, I guess, here back in. We got the 2 bolts that go all the way through here and here, and then we got that third one right there. Then I went ahead and put these 3 bolts back in for that bracket. Also went ahead and kind of half-ass cleaned off this cover, put it back in place. And I do believe that that is everything put back on with the exception of the wheel. And I do still need to tighten down that battery cable. I put it on but didn't tighten it up. And then I am going to go ahead, and I will recommend that you guys do this as well. I'm going to go ahead and drain out the radiator because we just put a brand new water pump on there, and I want to make sure that it has completely fresh coolant. So I'm going to get me another drain pan, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to loosen up the petcock, and I'm going to take off the radiator cap and let that drain out. Alright, we got our radiator cap removed. So now come up under here, and hopefully this will just twist by hand. Oh yeah. Nice. Very nice. Oh no, way too far. We'll leave it at that for a while and let it just piss on out of there. Alright, so our radiator is fully drained. I got my funnel set up on here, and I also went ahead and removed the reservoir and drained that out as well. I believe we had a mixture of coolant going on because that looks pretty green, and what came out of the reservoir was red. And I believe, I'm going to double check just to make sure, but I do believe that this vehicle is supposed to have the Toyota red coolant. So I'm going to double check on that. But I did get a little bit of gunk out of this reservoir here, and I think it may have been due to the mixing of coolant there. But we'll be correcting that issue today. Alright, so I looked it up, and it does look like this vehicle takes the Toyota red, or at least it can take the Toyota red. So we're going to be putting in some Xerox Asian vehicle formula for Toyota. I like to fill it up quite a ways before I go ahead and start it up. Once it seems like it's stopping as far as going down on the level, when it seems like it's not doing that anymore, is when I go ahead and add, or when I go ahead and start the engine. Crazy how much racket that makes. I'm just taking it in. I'm going to go ahead and add some more, and this will be pretty much the rest of the first gallon. Got a couple floaters in there. There was a little bit of gunk on this reservoir, but what can you do? I got it cleaned off pretty good, I think. Alright, I think it's time for a second gallon. Okay, that's all that's left after pouring a second gallon in. We do still have some in the funnel, and it has stopped accepting the coolant. So now what we want to go ahead and do is start the engine, let it reach operating temperature, and while it's doing that, we want to turn the heat on full blast. So we got her running. Doesn't sound too bad at all. Does have a little bit of a high idle, but I think that may be just because it's super cold outside and this thing hasn't really been started all day. And it's also going down as it warms up a little bit. So we're just going to go ahead and make sure that the engine's not going to overheat and that the coolant's totally full, and then we're going to take it on a test drive. Alright, we just got her in here running. We're waiting for that temperature gauge to get up about halfway. Doesn't seem like it's taken too much more coolant in, and luckily the idle seems to be pretty normal now. We got no check engine lights, no hesitations, so I think that we were definitely on point with our timing alignment. So I'm just going to wait for this engine to warm up just a little bit more, and then I'll go ahead and remove my funnel. It does still have some coolant in it, and once I do that, I'm going to go ahead and take it for a test drive. Alright, so now we're going out for the test drive. So far so good, everything's feeling great. Them dash lights on the left and right side seem to be out. It's not good. Gave the dash a little tap and they didn't really come back on. Nice and smooth on the acceleration. It feels great. Still no hesitations, no check engine lights, nothing like that. So far so good. There's this test drive here by my house that I like to do, where I pretty much come down the block and then there's a highway at the end of the neighborhood, and there is an old bait and tackle shop about to exit down, so I usually drive down there and come back. That way we can get it up to highway speed, make sure it's fully warmed up, and then at that point, if it's still not making, if there's still not any issues, then I'd say that we're good to go. I like to at least put a few miles on the car after doing a big job like this, just to make sure that everything is solid. One good thing I like about this job is the way that the timing belt tensioner was set up. It seems like, because of the fact that it kind of bolts up in there, that there's really not any way that the tension is gonna come off, so I feel pretty good about that. Here's that highway I was talking about here. So we'll go ahead and give her a good drive. Here we are at, that's an hour off because of daylight savings time, but we're here at 8:53 p.m. in the state of Missouri. Finishing up a timing belt. That's how we do it. Mobile mechanics. Making money at all hours of the day. Luckily, I got to work from home today because this is actually my brother's car, if I haven't mentioned that already. Just go ahead and go down here to this bait shop. I think it's definitely good to go for sure. Still no lights on, no hesitations, running extremely smooth. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish up this short little test drive and we'll pull her back up to the house. And that was the end of our timing belt replacement. If you found this video entertaining, or more importantly, if you learned something, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. If you've done a timing belt before, why don't you comment down below about what your timing belt experience has been like. And if you're interested in seeing more videos that I have coming out in the future, go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell to be notified right away as soon as they come out. Otherwise, hope you all have a great rest of your evening.